I think every woman in this particular time where everything is up for review, their bodies are shifting without permission, that we all deserve wins. I want women to feel wins. This is a lot of what this book is built around, is these small habits that add up over time, or not even a long amount of time, but that can really transform the quality of our lives.
Mariza, welcome to the Commune podcast. My God, what a treat.
What a treat. Thanks so much for having me, Jeff.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. Especially because there's a revolution afoot.
Oh, yes, there is. There's a movement.
We have to put it up.
Yeah. Oh,
the
yeah.
revolution is afoot.
We are. There we go.
It is called the Perimenopause Revolution. Congratulations, first of all.
Of all the books, this is absolutely one of my favorites and definitely very timely.
It is right on time. And, I think you're propelling the wave and catching the crest of the wave at the same time around a public conversation that has been pushed to the side really forever, right?
Yes, forever.
I think in the last few years, we've seen more focus on menopause, thankfully, but you're delving into perimenopause, and there's a little bit of a distinction there. So that would be helpful. If we could just start there, with the just basic definitional work of what is perimenopause and what are the different stages associated with perimenopause and menopause and postmenopause?
Yeah, I love this question because I think there's a lot of confusion, even in the medical system, about what the difference between perimenopause and menopause is. And menopause is just one day in time. You haven't had a period.
Wait, all this talk for just one day?
One day.
God, we've blown this way out of proportion.
And it depends on some women are going to say, or even health providers are going to say it's postmenopause from that day forward, or that it's menopause from that day forward. Whatever you feel comfortable designating yourself, all the ladies in midlife, you get to call it. I'm just going to be in menopause for the rest of my days, the second half of my life. So perimenopause is the transition leading into menopause. And that can be anywhere from 4 to 10 plus years. But natural menopause is anywhere between 45 and 55 years old. And so, a lot of us would love to be on the latter part of that, but it can be as early as 45 years old. And then perimenopause is, can start as early as our mid-30s, depending on that kind of 4 to 10 years. And so when women are starting to experience symptoms in their mid to late 30s, I think we got to start believing them, or at least being open to the conversation if their hormones are shifting. Now, what designates perimenopause is that hormones are erratically declining without permission, because no woman asked for that.
You did not write them a permission slip.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
You just stay where you're at. Keep rhythmically cycling, please.
I'm curious if there is a relationship between the primary hormones, if you see progesterone first drop, what's going on there.
Absolutely.
with all
And
that.
Every woman is going to be a little bit different. And basically what it really comes down to is we only have so many eggs in our reservoir, in our ovaries. And the body knows that. The ovaries know that. And as we start to wind down that egg supply in our mid to late 30s, some of us early 40s, it depends. I would say the average patient of mine, it's 42 where they come into my practice and they're like, what is going on with me? I do not feel like myself anymore. But it can happen earlier as well. Like I said, we're starting to see it late 30s. So we have this limited supply of eggs. They start to wind down, and that communication between the ovaries and the brain becomes really just garbled. It's like trying to play telephone with a 5-year-old. You try to send a message through and it's just a big mess. That miscommunication between our brain and the ovaries starts to cause a miscommunication between our hormones. Now, the hormone that starts to decline first is going to be progesterone, and that's because ovulation, Jeff, was always the main event. It was never our period. And so as ovulation becomes a little bit more inconsistent, sometimes we're ovulating, sometimes we're not, or even at times it's not as robust as it used to be, that corpus luteum, that temporary structure that makes progesterone on the back end, because whether you like it or not, you prep for pregnancy every single month. That is just the biology of our species. And when we start to lose that ovulation or that robust ovulation, we stop making robust lost progesterone on the back end. And so that progestation hormone begins to decline. And so a lot of what the symptoms will look like in the very beginning of either late reproduction or early perimenopause is brain related, because we know progesterone is a brain hormone as well, known as allopregnanolone. And that helps GABA to do its job, which is puts the brakes on stress response, puts the brakes on feeling overly anxious. And as that hormone or that neurotransmitter begins to not work as appropriately as it used to, we start to notice more sleep issues, more anxiousness, mood swings, more PMS symptoms. So for me, PMS was maybe 2 days, before my period. And now it's just this stretch. It could be 4, it could be 7. It just becomes very nebulous over time.
I would never guess that. I've only known you to be absolutely 100% cheerful and always in a great mood.
I'll tell you, everybody loves day 12 us, Jeff.
Okay, now I know where you are. So I want to hover over the relationship between perimenopause and mood, but also I have a question that came up. I've always understood progesterone to be, I guess, sort of a stabilizing relationship with estrogen. So as you're having more anovulatory cycles, basically that estrogen's like building up, like the lining is building up in the uterus, but there's no progesterone there to kind of counteract it and check it. And so by extension, you're getting maybe irregular bleeding or heavy bleeding. Is that a fair understanding of what's happening?
Yeah, I would say that in early perimenopause, and this isn't for every woman, but for definitely some, where we see progesterone beginning to decline and estrogen isn't really declining yet. Again, there can be some erratic nature of estrogen, but she's still hanging tight for a minute. She's
at the party.
yeah, she's still at the party. And so women will notice maybe symptoms of unopposed estrogen in that late luteal phase. So more bloating, more tender, heavy breasts, more kind of rocky, hard breast, so to speak, that don't, feel great a couple days leading up to your period. Also, definitely more painful, heavy periods leading up. Now, we're not talking about crime scene periods yet. That's typically in late perimenopause that we'll start to see those, where that's when we are skipping periods for more than 60 days. And this is what the CDC always thought perimenopause was, that we were really knocking on the door of menopause. So we really ignored women leading into late perimenopause as, oh, it's just stress, or you're just a mom, or you're getting older, or this is just midlife. It wasn't until women started skipping periods or having these really intense periods after bouts of not having one that we kind of recognized that as perimenopause.
So what is the relationship there between the decrease in estradiol and progesterone and some of these neurotransmitters that are highly associated with mood?
Oh, I love that question, because I think it's important for us to note that this isn't bikini medicine, right? That these are whole body hormones. These are brain hormones. And when I think about the master CEO of the brain, it's going to be estradiol. Yes, testosterone is doing its job in terms of cognitive function and motivation and feeling like really energized. But estrogen is running the show, because estrogen is helping to regulate dopamine and serotonin. And so all of a sudden we are struggling when we're going through early, even into late perimenopause, with a lot of brain related symptoms. So when you think about the majority of symptoms in perimenopause, it's going to be either cognitive or emotionally driven, or even sleep. I mean, even hot flashes and night sweats, kind of mismatch in thermoregulation, we start to see those pop up even in early perimenopause, but often in late perimenopause. So the most common symptom actually is irritability. So I don't know if there was a time where maybe you, in your household, you breathing or chewing wasn't acceptable.
Yeah, well, the list is long.
I'm sure the list is long.
And probably has nothing to do with perimenopause, actually, but exacerbated, certainly, the critique of my habits.
Yeah, and you can imagine 30 plus years rhythmically cycling these hormones very consistently. The brain expects these hormones to bind to receptor sites all over, whether it's the hippocampus or it's the limbic system or it's the prefrontal cortex. And then one day you've got your master CEO who has shown up to work every single day from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And honestly, it's 24/7. Estrogen's showing up 24/7, doesn't show up until 2:00 in the afternoon, but doesn't go home until 1:00 that night, and then doesn't come back to work till 10, and then leaves in 2 in the afternoon. So, but the brain's like, I'm reliant on this fuel, not only for neurogenesis, but energy metabolism, for binding to neurotransmitters. Everything that makes the brain really work well for us becomes very unstable, and a massive remodeling results as the impact of estrogen and progesterone declining.
If a woman is like, I'm 37 and I'm feeling this, and this, what would that be?
I would say irritability, low stress tolerance. All of a sudden, like, you're not able to multitask the way that you used to. You're having to effort a little bit harder. And then also, I would say, again, the sleep issues, usually being wired and tired at night because of that low stress tolerance that kind of tips into that scale. Also, poor workout recovery and low mental fatigue, and then weight resistance. Well, women will start to notice that weight resistance start to show up in their late 30s.
If a woman is having some sort of confluence of those symptoms, is there a way to actually test if you are in perimenopause?
Great question. Yeah, I wish that it just announced itself. It's just like, I'm here.
Like,
hey.
here.
Yeah,
now
one
deal
test.
with it. Yeah.
I know for me, when I finally realized I was in perimenopause, because it took me about 6 months to figure it out. Because it's, I always say, by the time we start to experience this decline in hormones, we've lived a life. Many women have been, they're moms, they've been through pregnancy and postpartum, or they've had menstrual cycle issues and things have come up over the years with their hormones. And so by the time we get into perimenopause, we may have experienced a little bit of insulin resistance or deregulating our stress response system. And so when these symptoms begin to hit, it starts to feel like an exacerbation of things that we've experienced before. So, like even myself, I was like, is this my thyroid? Is this my stress response system? Am I too burned out? I'm a young mom. Like, what is going on here? So I remember trying to figure it out. So I always tell women, I diagnose perimenopause clinically 3 different ways, or I bring in these 3 different areas. One, tracking your menstrual cycle. Often, although we're still cycling regularly in perimenopause or early perimenopause, you may notice that your cycle went from 29 days to 26 days, or that maybe there's some spotting in that luteal phase, or your PMS symptoms are a little bit more exacerbated. You're just noticing changes. Also, your symptoms. You're beginning to add up these symptoms that start to look a little bit like perimenopause, especially in that luteal phase. I would say in the beginning, women are great in the follicular phase. They're still doing really well with testosterone and estrogen, but in that luteal phase, it's all bets are off. It starts to tank. And so they're noticing half of the month, they're not sleeping well, or half of the month, they're really moody, or they're struggling with PMS symptoms. So those would be some things to look out for. And then I always recommend looking at labs, although often it can be a moving target, especially with hormones, but also highly sensitive CRP could be shifting, or vitamin D levels, or nutrient deficiencies. And so I'm looking at all the labs to kind of put together the pieces. I notice that fasting insulin will start to creep up, blood pressure will begin to creep, and even lipids. So I'm looking at all of that, but usually it's symptoms and cycle-driven symptoms.
Right. So you can't just do labs and look at my estrogen marker or my progesterone marker, because that's just a snapshot of where it happens to be. So
I can't tell you how many labs I've looked at, and women are clearly in perimenopause, but the labs, and we're talking functional normal. They're in good functional lab ranges, and they're still experiencing symptoms.
Yeah. So let's talk about weight for a second, because this is something that presents itself that is just something people have to deal with. Like the redeposition of fat, for example, away from subcutaneous fat to sort of visceral fat, kind of the changing of shape of women's bodies, sometimes a little additional kind of insulin resistance that leads to a little extra belly fat. What's going on kind of behind the curtain there? Why is this happening, and how do we get at it?
I love this question. This is the $1 million question. Why, now that I'm in my 40s, everything that worked for me in my 20s and 30s doesn't work anymore? I haven't changed. That's the thing I hear all the time. I haven't changed anything. Yes, right. And if anything, women, I do this as well. We tend to overdo. So we overcut the calories, more of a calorie deficit, more overworking, and often that's driving that stress response system isn't going to do us any favors either. So lo and behold, because reproduction is a metabolically driven process, probably one of the biggest metabolically driven processes in the body, estrogen is very influential in insulin sensitivity, in body composition changes, in muscle protein synthesis, in bone remodeling. I mean, think about every major system of the body, your cardiometabolic health. Estrogen is playing a massive role. And as estrogen begins to erratically fluctuate, it's not just the brain that takes a hit here. It's going to be, you start to lose muscle mass. I mean, we're already kind of losing it due to age, but estrogen is doing us no favors as it begins to decline. We know that with progesterone, we become more inflamed. We have more water retention as progesterone begins to decline as well. But yeah, women will start to notice that when we're estrogenic, we've got decent estrogen, or it's consistent. It's in the hips and the butt, and the thighs. It's kind of where you're used to it. But then as it begins to shift and we see more insulin resistance, and I always say that weight resistance is a result of insulin resistance, we begin to see that deeper visceral belly fat land around the organs and also in the belly. And so women can, on the scale, and it not shift at all, maybe a pound or two, but they've noticed that the body composition changes are happening without permission. And that, as much as the research isn't really there to, not enough research. I hear a lot in the bro world that women are just lazy or they're not trying hard enough. And I'm like, do you know how many women I have seen in the last 17 years in my practice who I believe them when they tell me. Also, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and it was all about being thin. So if I put on 5 pounds, Jeff, I would just go back to the Stairmaster. I would run more. I would train more. I would slim down. I would do some type of detox and get back to that weight. And I think it's a lot of those same strategies that we tried in our 20s and our 30s worked. They did work. I don't think it was good for us, but they did work. And now I think we're still trying to do a lot of those same strategies in our 40s, even late 30s, and they're not working. Yeah. And so I think we have to really think about what we're trying to achieve when we're taking care of our bodies.
Yeah. I mean, when I start to look at compromised metabolism, the way I begin to often think about it is in terms of insulin resistance. Yes. Essentially, my cells stop being as good at using substrates like glucose and fat for the production of energy at the mitochondrial level. And instead of actually uptaking that glucose, for example, to make energy, it's actually storing it as fat.
That's
at
correct.
Least this was my experience with it. So you're not alone. Okay?
No, and mine too, right? And so how many of us are coming into perimenopause a little bit insulin resistant, and hormones were kind of keeping us stable? We're kind of keeping it at bay. And then as our hormones deregulate, also life is happening. I'm not going to pretend estrogen, again, if it's having an impact on the brain, you may be feeling low, a chunk of the month, or you may be feeling maybe you didn't get enough sleep that night. I think that there's a cacophony of a lot of things that are happening. I wish it was as simple as estrogen's dropping, insulin's becoming less sensitive. That's the deal. Totally. It's definitely a lot of things that are happening at once.
It's multilinear. I mean, if you think of stress levels, stimulating cortisol, stimulating glucose, stimulating insulin, all that cascade alone right there could essentially disrupt metabolism. And I think it does.
I think it absolutely does.
Let's get into some strategies then. I know in the book you have 7 pillars that you go quite deep in, and I don't want to give away too much of the secrets. People have got to get the book. You got to get the book. But let's touch on some of them because I know metabolism is a big focus. So maybe we can...
It's the through line. Because I think women ultimately, I think all of us, we want to feel alive. We want to feel vital. We want to feel energized. But with that, the first step, if we know that weight gain is a side effect of insulin resistance, 93% of us are struggling with some level of insulin resistance, and women are more vulnerable in perimenopause and beyond. And the through line for me is, how do I protect women's cardiometabolic health? That's my goal. I get that we want to be lean. We want to feel like we can get back into our size whatever clothes, but at the end of the day, heart disease is the number one killer of women. And we know that once we get into menopause, we're kind of climbing up a steeper hill. So if there was a window of vulnerability, but also a window of opportunity, it's right now. Like I'm in the window of opportunity right now.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You got it.
So blood sugar is the first place I would focus.
Yeah.
And if you can afford it, if you can, I know we invest in a lot of different things, but the first thing I would tell any patient of mine is put a continuous glucose monitor on. Let's get real about the data. I love that we live in a time of bioobservability. I wear my Whoop every single day. I just took a CGM off. I put one on every single quarter because I just want to make sure that as I am moving through perimenopause, my blood sugar is staying pretty stable with the things that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So wear that continuous glucose monitor. And can you balance your blood sugar without a CGM? Yes. So I always say it starts with meals. It starts with what you eat. And I have so many recipes in the book and I've got a whole plan, but I'm a big fan of fiber, ideally 30 grams of fiber a day. Ideally, if you can do it, 25 to 30 grams of protein per meal and some good healthy fats, and do your best to walk back the added sugar, the sugary drinks, like even the things like kombucha. I mean, it all adds up.
Yeah.
It really
Kombucha
does.
is a sneaky one. Just to double click on the CGM thing for a second. And I know I've addressed this a lot on the show, but for people who aren't totally familiar with it, it's just like this little disc that you can put in.
It's a little sensor that you snap into your arm. I just snapped one into my husband's arm the other day. And
was he grateful?
Yeah. He's always like, can you put this thing on?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's tracking his blood sugar right now. He's staying on top of that. And depending on if you're using a company or if you're just using, Abbott with a Freestyle, you can scan that sensor and it will look at the blood in your interstitial fluid, which is basically giving you a sense of your blood sugar at any given time of the day. And in the beginning, if you're like me, I was scanning that sucker like every 5 minutes.
At the beginning, it's really easy to be neurotic about it.
Totally.
I mean, in a curious way.
In a very curious way.
You're like, okay, blueberries. How did that do? Or like white rice. Oh, for me? Oh, that's fine. Or whatever.
Or espresso in the morning.
Espresso.
Like, can I do espresso without eating?
Yeah. And this, of course, this gives you a dashboard into your metabolic health. It's not perfect, but it's a decent proxy. I mean, if we could measure insulin, that would be amazing. But glucose is an easier molecule to
I always
measure.
say it's a great biomarker for our overall longevity and our overall metabolic health, but it's a proxy to what's going on with insulin as well.
Totally.
And what I will say is that I think a lot of us feel like we eat pretty healthy, especially compared to our cousin or our family member or our bestie or our parents and I can't tell you how many times people are like, I eat really healthy, and then we put the CGM on and we just learn a lot about what your body can tolerate. So I think
numbers don't lie.
Numbers don't lie.
What is the relationship then between some of the advice that you just gave, like for example, eat more fiber? What's the relationship between fiber and blood glucose management?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking about the gut microbiome, right? Fiber is going to act as a barrier, kind of like a gel-like barrier to help kind of mitigate if you had white rice on the back end of that, just an example. It's going to slow down the digestion of that rice. When we think about drinking I'll never forget when I wore a CGM for the first time, I had ordered, for some reason, Jeff, I thought you could order a Frappuccino without sugar. Like I asked for an espresso, I was like, no sugar, and they're like, you can't.
Oh God!
I was like, no sugar. And they were like, there's no sugar in this. And I was like, are you sure? Fast forward 30 minutes. I can taste it. I can taste sugar like nobody's business. But I was amazed. It was the biggest jump I had ever seen on my continuous glucose monitor. And that's how fast, depending on I always say, if you're going to drink a Frappuccino or a vanilla latte or you're going to drink a milkshake, walk while you do it.
Yeah.
Like don't even sit for 2 minutes.
Right.
Like just be walking that entire time.
Just to uptake it.
Yeah, as your muscles are able to uptake that. Basically, fiber allows us to kind of blunt that blood sugar response by kind of coating our small intestine as we're bringing that glucose into the bloodstream. Whatever we can do to blunt that blood sugar response. But really, I mean, we're talking about semantics here. Like I think if we're really mindful about eating adequate protein in our diet, really focusing on fiber-rich foods like the cruciferous veggies, the fiber veggies, and then those healthy omega fats or healthy fats, and then doing our best to get rid of refined carbs, refined sugar, like that added sugar, but then being open to looking at the labels.
Well, okay, so I also want to talk about muscle, because this was also just personally a big one for me, to engage into more resistance training, to activate muscle protein synthesis as a way to control blood sugar. And that doesn't seem like an obvious correlation there, but there is one. So help us understand this.
Absolutely. So what I love about muscle, and I know you've had a lot of people talking about this here on the show, but that it is our metabolic sink. So muscle has that ability to bring glucose in and to store it and to use it efficiently without having to bring insulin into the conversation, which is so nice. So I'm a big proponent of moving at least after meals, but still I want that metabolic armor in general. So I'm a big fan of sending the brain safety signals, but I'm also a big fan of like, how do we future-proof our body for a metabolism and a brain that we want working down the line? And that is really through muscle too. And so whether it is moving after meals, I mean, that's going to help you take in that glucose. It's going to help to balance the blood sugar. I think being physically active in general is the way to go. When I look at the Blue Zone research, they're not doing power yoga. They're not doing CrossFit classes. They're just constantly moving all of the time. I want to go lift weights. Like, that's the thing I want to go do, because the juice has always been worth the squeeze, like, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think those are the two. If I had to kind of prioritize, it's, with some resistance training, and that can look like body weight. It can look like, weights.
It can look like 20
bands.
minutes. It can look like 10 minutes. It can look like it's in your house or it's at the gym. It can look a lot of ways.
I think that, in combination with what you said before, which is essentially integrating movement organically into your life, it's sometimes known as NEAT, that acronym, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. We have to give everything an acronym now,
we do,
right?
Yes.
It just basically means
move your butt.
Yeah,
move your butt all the time.
But don't move your butt just in a little 45-minute window at the end of the day.
No, we're talking all day long.
Yeah.
I mean, if there was anything that I want people to gain from the book and from this conversation, and I get that it may require a bit of a reframe, but it's to build your life around movement. Beautiful. That's how I think if we start thinking as what we do, how we schedule our day around punctuating our life with movement, it would change everything.
Yeah.
It would change how we feel. It would shove back chronic disease. It would lower our biological clock. Like, that's what I'm most interested in. And start moving your body. Like, even if it's just after meals or it's between meetings, or you kind of just build in these 5-minute exercise snacks, whatever that may be, like, commit to 30 days of this. And then see how you feel in the next month when you're not moving. Like, when my body isn't moving, I feel it. It doesn't feel good. I'm a big fan of exercise snacks, though. As a mom with a young child who's running around all the time, like, I love exercise snacks.
Me too. One of the little hacks that I started to reify in my own life was, instead of making my conference calls an hour long, make them 45 minutes or 50 minutes, because you basically still have accomplished the same thing, but then you have these 10 minutes to do what you just said. Go around, take a walk. I have in my house pull-up bars everywhere, to my wife's great chagrin.
They're great.
Yeah,
we have one
great.
for Kingston, my son, who's 4, and we have them for us. I have kettlebells by all of the desks in my house. I have weights by every desk in the house, because even in 3 minutes, I can knock out 3 sets of bicep curls or shoulder presses or something.
Yeah.
And
also great for bone health, right? Because as the royal we, experience dips in estradiol, that's also going to impact bone density, right?
Yeah, and so I think a lot of people think we're losing bone after menopause. By the time we get to early menopause, by the time we get to like our early 50s, we've lost up to 20% of our bone. Get your hormones, get HRT, but also, bash those bones, as Dr. Von der Wright likes to say. No mamby-pamby weights. And when I think she talks about heavy weights, and I love heavy weight lifting as well, like, it's really, if you've been lifting 10-pound weights or 12-pound weights for the last 6 months, it's time to pick up 15s. It's time to pick up some 20s. Just like move yourself up a little bit. If you've been using the same weights for 5 years, let's pop you up to, a higher weight because you can do it.
A little progressive overload.
Yeah.
I want to move to emotional regulation because this is an issue, and we alluded to it briefly before. We live in this persuasion, attention economy where literally information, when it's sensationalized and elicits fear and outrage, it's actually rewarded on social media, right? It's algorithmically preferenced or on TV. Yeah. And so, we are living within this kind of deluge of information that literally is designed to tickle our human negativity bias and by extension, downstream, trigger stress hormones, et cetera. So what do we do here to emotionally regulate, particularly in perimenopause?
First, we just have to get rid of social media. No,
okay, fine.
Gone.
Yeah.
No. And as I talked about a little bit earlier, as you alluded to, is that low stress tolerance. And I will tell you, we kind of joked about first puberty, second puberty before we started, and how the thing about second puberty is that it's a higher stakes game. A lot of times these are women who are project managing their household. They're the CEO in their businesses, in their families. And so there's a lot of things that women are juggling at all times. We're in a sandwich generation. I really think that this is the messy middle. Very much messy. I have a sister who had a stroke a couple of years ago and is just really struggling. She's 2 years younger than me. And I was on the phone literally driving up to Topanga, and it was her birthday, and I called my mom, and my mom just hit me with all the things that was wrong with my sister. And I was like, oh my, okay, I wasn't ready. I didn't know that was going to be the conversation. And so I'm like trying to think, okay, do I need to call this doctor? Like, how can I support her? How can I support my mom? What are some more supplements that we can be recommending? And so it could even be, siblings, you're helping to support throughout this journey. And, I think a lot of us don't realize that's the insidious nature of stress, is that it can be going on for so long that it just feels like every day that you're just swimming in this soup of cortisol. I always tell women, one, if you can notice physical sensations. So for me, I notice a lot of contraction when I'm stressed. I'll notice that I'm making decisions too fast. I'm not taking a moment to breathe. So if you notice contraction, or that your shoulders are coming up to your ears, or that you are firing off at your family members and they're like backing up because they're afraid that they're going to fall under your wrath, that would be the time to take a moment and do a state shift. So whether that's walking around the block, or that is shaking it off, or dancing, or breathing, whatever works for you, like take that moment to shift your state. That's what I always recommend. Then I am a big fan of having people in your life that you can reach out to. A pillar in the book is all about community, because nothing worse than going through perimenopause thinking you're crazy because you don't know where your water is, or you don't even remember what it's called, for goodness sake, or you think you're having early dementia because you can't remember the words you're supposed to use in a presentation. And then come to find out your bestie over here, she doesn't even know what the word water bottle is either. So like it's really nice when you've got friends who can back you up. Or you accidentally yell at your kids, but your bestie did too. Like, you have this connection where you can connect. So reach out to a friend. And then the other thing I recommend, and this has been the game changer for me, I feel like my system, it goes into default stress response mode faster than anything else. I feel like it's my default mode. And so I book in my day with morning and evening rituals that send safety signals to my brain. So gratitude practice, breath practice, and we're talking minutes. I'm not talking about a whole mega routine. Being out in nature in my backyard, having a good sleep routine, just taking moments where I am moving and shifting my state so my brain knows that everything's okay. So those are some things that I recommend.
Yeah, and I think everything that you've described, these are not intangible. I mean, they're doable, and they're within people's grasp to actually execute around. It's really then habit stacking a lot of these things, and you can see an incredible benefit in a relatively short period of time. I mean, I know the kind of the third section of the book is very focused on actually like a program
on
implementing.
5-week program.
And I want to we'll get there. But I think, that's like, I think that's really helpful.
I'm living
It's
this
not
life.
like overwhelming. It's
Yeah.
not like, okay, 34-degree ice bath and a marathon.
No, I am the perimenopausal woman, and I am running around, running a business and taking care of my family and running my household. And I'm doing the best I can to honor my body in this process. And I think every woman in this particular time where everything is up for review, their bodies are shifting without permission, that we all deserve wins. I want women to feel wins. And this is a lot of what this book is built around, is these small habits that add up over time, or not even a long amount of time, but that can really transform the quality of our lives. At a time where women can feel like the quality of their lives are diminishing. It's what society has told us as well. It's further from the truth if we have some of these really, what I consider to be kind of tangible changes that we can bring into our life.
Let's talk a little bit about hormone therapy. This has been in the news more and more, like
the black box warning,
the black box warning on vaginal estrogen, et cetera. When is it appropriate for a woman in perimenopause to start thinking about hormone therapy?
I would say it is appropriate when she starts to have symptoms. When you're noticing that your symptoms are disrupting your quality of life, that is time. If you're having a hard time going to sleep at night, or you're having anxiety when you're waking up in the morning, or you're noticing that your mood and your irritability, it's impacting your relationships. I will tell you, one of the number one reasons why women come to me for HRT is they're experiencing rage. And it's affecting their relationships. They don't know who they're becoming. And they're just like, how can I curtail this out of the blue rage that is happening to me halfway through my month? And so that's when we start having that conversation. And it can be as early perimenopause. And for some women, maybe even a bit earlier than that.
Do you veer towards a particular form of vehicle, like, is it like transdermal patches, or where do you?
I've got my transdermal patch on.
There you go. Is that the preferred delivery method?
I think a couple things come into play. When I think about estrogen creams, those are compounded for one, so they're more pricey. But I have a little boy. And, if I have cream on my arm, so there's a lot of things that you got to take into consideration. Some women don't do well with the adhesives, of the patch. And so they need to find a different methodology. But yeah, I would say normally patches are a great place to start. Especially for symptom relief. And oral micronized progesterone is a really great place to start as well, particularly for the sleep and the brain-related symptoms.
And can a woman go to her primary care physician for that? Or do you have to go to like a specialized endocrinologist, or what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I wish even my primary isn't doing it.
No.
They'll run my labs, which is nice because we pay a lot of insurance, especially with a little person in my life. So we have pretty good insurance. So I'll get labs ran through my insurance, but I will take all that over somewhere else. So yeah, mostly you're going to have to probably reach out to a provider that is in the Menopause Society, or, there's a lot of telemedicine companies that are popping up.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
The one thing I will say about telemedicine is, one, it's pretty inexpensive HRT, but you will get more of a one size fits all. So there'll be you'll really need to communicate and advocate for yourself when it comes to your HRT protocol. I will say that it typically isn't a one size fits all for women. There's going to be a lot of different things that you're going to have to figure out. And if you're working with a telemedicine company, then you're going to really need to communicate that. But there are providers, they're popping up more and more every single day. We went 20 years without doctors prescribing hormone replacement therapy. And so there's a big knowledge gap that we've got to overcome.
So take us through the last section of the book without revealing too much, which is really a prescribed protocol, wrapping up a lot of the things that we've talked about, but in a very kind of specific way.
Yeah, I think everyone loves a little plan.
Yeah.
I like a plan. Like when I'm ready,
give me a plan.
Give me a plan.
Yeah.
The first step in that plan, though, is going to be mindset. Because, I think we all get to that point, particularly in our 40s, where we wonder, is this it? Is this how I want to keep living my life? And particularly in perimenopause, I always call it the reckoning, where everything really is up for review. Relationships, jobs, a lot of people change careers in their 40s, particularly women. And so I think it's important that we get clear about who we want to become in the second half of our lives, be really intentional about that. And so that there's a chapter all on mindset that asks a lot of questions and has you envision your future healthy self. Like, how do you want to be living? Like, I think about my mom who she's training for a marathon right now. She just ran a half marathon last weekend. And it was at 50 years old where she was like, I am training for marathons. I am going to become a competitive tennis player. This woman is 65 in a couple weeks. She has phenomenal metabolic labs. Like, when you look at her results, she is vibrant. She's alive. She's heading to Australia as well on her birthday. And I'm like, give me some of that. Like, I want that bottled up. And it was a mindset shift. It was a major reframe for her because perimenopause was a nightmare for my mom. Yeah. And so she was like, I am doing this on my terms. That's the first start, is get your mind right so that if you're going to embody this 5-week program, you are clear about what you want, about what you want to achieve. And then it is exercise plans, beginner, intermediate. It is exercise snacks. It is meal plans and recipes and all the things you could possibly imagine to really make this as easy as possible for you to be living your best life.
It's perfect. It's very, very clear and totally achievable. I love the way that you laid it out. Little personal question for me. Like, what can men do and partners do to support women as they're going through transitions, whether it's into perimenopause or into menopause and postmenopause?
I so appreciate that, Jeff. Thanks for asking.
Well, I live among women. This is my natural habitat.
You are surrounded by amazing women. And I will say that I think perimenopause is deeply destabilizing and transformative. This is really an opportunity for us to, are we people pleasers? Are there things that we're tolerating? Are there parts of us that we're ready to let go of? Our boundaries need to be established in a bigger and better way that really attunes us to our priorities and non-negotiables. And in that, massive transformation, if you have a partner who's like, I kind of just liked the old you. Why don't you just stay like this? That's just not going to work. And so it's a lot of communication, understanding what's going on in cyclically, having communications, being open to take on some of that emotional and mental labor. I know for a vulnerable share here is that because of perimenopause, I'm experiencing more chronic migraines. There are days where I wake up in the morning, I wake up with migraines, and I will tell my husband, I'm like, hey, is it okay if you lead the charge on getting Kingston ready in the morning? Can you take him to school in the morning? And so I think it's that communication, that very vulnerable communication about where you're at, and your partner willing to step up. It moves mountains in terms of your relationship and you staying strong and solid. Because your wife or your partner, we're talking about a massive transformation here that at times can feel like she doesn't even recognize herself anymore. And so I think the more that you're having these beautiful conversations, the more that you're listening to podcasts like this on Commune, like that's what's going to help move the needle in strengthening that relationship.
What should men know about sexual appetite during this period? This is the whole podcast was actually just to get to this question. Okay. No, I'm just kidding.
I love this question.
No, but seriously, because, what is changing and how can men be sensitive to kind of changing libido during this time period?
Absolutely. I think, again, everything is up for review. We think about that sexual phase is really ovulation, leading into ovulation. Again, the joke around day 12 us being everybody's favorite and day 27, maybe not.
Yeah. And is that because testosterone is rising at that point?
Testosterone and estrogen. Estrogen is peaking so that luteinizing hormone can pop that egg in ovulation. Yeah. So that's typically what's happening
evolutionarily
there.
Evolutionary makes sense.
It all makes sense, right? Now we're primed to get biologically to be a biological success. And so it makes a lot of sense in terms of us being, we're animals at the end of the day, is what it comes down to. So I would say, I think it's worth knowing your woman's cycle. Okay. I remember Dr. Mindy Pelz I forget who she was being interviewed by, but she's like, when's the window to talk to your wife? And she's like, you got this 2-day window in the entire month to have like a meaningful conversation, like a crucial conversation with your wife. And that is leading up to ovulation. She's going to be the most receptive to anything, really, you know. And so that libido window, I would say the majority of women, you know, in that follicular phase, that's still working pretty well, you know, until we're getting to that late perimenopause, kind of knocking on menopause's door. So again, know that follicular phase. That's going to be really important. And I think, you know, let's redefine intimacy and pleasure. And you may have to, you know, work through that with your partner as well about like, maybe it's going to look a little bit different.
Yeah. Okay, dudes. Take note. Day 12.
Day
right?
12.
Okay.
Yeah.
Know your woman's cycle.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, come on.
Everybody.
That's totally possible.
Especially if she's running the household, like if she's the center spoke of the entire wheel, like knowing her cycle is the ultimate biohack.
So I've been with Skylar since we were 17, you know, so
it's incredible.
And so sex has really changed, you know, in many ways. And I sort of had to understand at some juncture that as we got into our 30s, that sex wasn't really as much about intercourse. Fingers crossed it ended up there, you know, to be honest, but like that's not always where it started. And I had
you
to
had 3
like
girls at that point.
Yeah, I had to get wise to that it's also about mood, that there's other aspects that maybe sort of sex as intercourse had a longer on-ramp.
Yes. And sex doesn't necessarily need to be intercourse, you know, and so there's that as well. And
really,
that's
oh man,
I know,
I
know. We're changing the dialogue around what sex is, and it's not just penetrative sex, right? And 100%. So it does change, especially if you've got, you know, Skylar, for example, raising 3 girls, and we both are raising those 3 girls, but she's probably the one taking on, you know, as moms, we just are taking on a lot of that, and so being mindful about, you know, freeing up some of that mental, physical, and emotional labor. I think that's going to be really big. You know, maybe you're unloading, nothing sexier than a husband or a partner unloading the dishwasher or folding the laundry or just handling some of those things, keeping the house looking. So that our brain, I'll tell you, my house is always screaming at me. There's stuff everywhere. The house is always like, pick me up, you know? And so I can't walk into my house without seeing stuff. Whereas my husband walks right past it, doesn't see any of it. I'm like, how do you not see the dining room table over here? There's stuff piled up, and he just doesn't see it. And so it's definitely communication is important here.
So unload the dishwasher, but in some shorts,
some little shorts. Yeah, absolutely.
That combination is just
maybe
irresistible.
Just like just an apron.
I have an apron for that. It's an apron that has like a
the man body.
The man body. There you go. See, you must have one.
We have one too. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, what else should we know about this book? So Perimenopause Revolution is coming out like now.
I want to just, the 3 things that you're going to get from it. I think so many women want to know, is this perimenopause? Am I actually in perimenopause? And so that's the first part of this book is really, let me answer that question for you. Let me help you figure that out. Even if your provider is just gaslighting you over here and telling you, oh no, you're too young. And then also symptoms. Symptoms are signals. The body is telling you something. So it's important to connect those symptoms to your future health outcomes, particularly in our 40s, ladies listening. And then again, the pillars, including connection, mental health, all of that is so important. I know we didn't get into some of that. There's not enough time. And then again, if you want the full kit and caboodle, the plan, it's all laid out, so simple. You can get all the bonuses as well at drmariza.com/book. I have more workout videos there, more recipes there. I just don't want you to feel like you don't have everything you need.
Well, thank you so much. This book is incredibly thoughtful and beautifully laid out and clear, and can be just a great roadmap for women going through this transition in their life. And I also just feel that, you know, your voice is such a kind and optimistic and positive voice. You're such a great portrait of living this thing. And I think you can inspire a lot of people. So I'm very grateful that you're here and that you're doing this work.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Grateful to you.
Thanks.